Okay, I make that 10:31. So I think we are probably now ready to go live. Welcome everybody. This is the official welcome now to the start of our digital glaucoma support group. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Philippa Mason and I'm the Glaucoma UK Development Manager for Scotland. With me today and to do a talk all about glaucoma and genetics is Mr. Anthony Khawaja. Anthony is a consultant ophthalmic surgeon at Moorfields Eye Hospital and an associate professor at UCL Institute of Ophthalmology. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us and for giving up your time to talk to us today. Now, just a few bits about how we're going to run today. We've had a bit of feedback about our intro and closing sessions. What we're going to do is a trial session today to do a quicker intro, because you guys have all been using Zoom for so long now, you know what you're doing. So we're going to cut this section down so we can get into the nitty-gritty of the talks. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if there's any information that we're missing that you require. And we, as I said, take your feedback all very seriously. What we're going to do today is I'm going to hand over to Anthony for a talk in a minute. And after Anthony's finished speaking, we will have a Q&A as we normally do. Please post any questions you have in the Q&A box, please. And don't forget to like any questions that others might have that you think, oh, that's a good question. I would have probably asked that myself. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the questions on this topic, on glaucoma and genetics. This is probably not the best forum for kind of generic glaucoma questions or for general glaucoma questions. So if you have a question relating to something specifically about your glaucoma, can I suggest that you contact our helpline team who will be able to assist you. I'm going to put up their details at the end, or if you want to find them now, they're available on our website at www.glaucoma.uk. Hello to everybody watching us on Facebook today. You are also free to join in and ask questions. You can comment on your Facebook feed and your questions will then be fed into me at the webinar. Now, there's going to be two short polls I'm going to do today, and this is to basically help us see what difference the sessions are making. So I'm going to put the first poll up now. Let me just check that one's right. Okay, you should see this coming up on your screen. Loads of you would have done this before. That's wonderful. I can see you all answering. And this is really to help us at Glaucoma UK work out how much you know at the beginning and then how much you know at the end. You're doing a great job there interactively, everybody. I can see your questions, your answers coming in beautifully. Right, I think I'm just waiting another minute for that poll to be right. Look at you all. You're all wonderful. You all know what to do now. This is excellent. And without further ado, I am going to stop sharing my slides and I am going to hand over to Anthony. Okay, Anthony, welcome. And yes, if you could share your slides, that would be wonderful.
Great, thanks. Can you see those okay?
I can indeed, thanks. Okay,
thanks very much for the introduction, Philippa, and thanks to all of you for attending this webinar, which is a chance for me to speak about something I'm very passionate about. And I think is probably quite important to a lot of you as well, and that's glaucoma and genetics. So, what do we mean by genetics? What is the genetic code? Well, essentially, the genetic code, also known the code of life, really is the program. It's the blueprint for many aspects of who we are, of what we look like, of how we behave even. So for example, the color of our eyes is very much genetic. And in fact, we've solved this genetic puzzle. So now on the basis of somebody's genetic code, if one of you gave me your genetic code, I could look at it and I could predict with over 99% accuracy what color your eyes were. It's not quite as simple as we were taught at school, where it's just one part of a gene. It's actually lots of genes that come together to give you your final eye color. Hair color is very genetic as well. So very much dependent on your genetic code is what color your hair will turn out. Now, we can't predict this quite as well as eye color, so we're not quite so smart there, but we're sort of at over 90% accuracy now. at being able to predict someone's hair color. But I love this photograph of the actress Emma Stone with 3 different hair colors here. So I think predicting her hair color from her genetic code would be quite difficult. And I think this is a nice illustration about how our behaviors and how we interact with the environment might as well influence ultimately what we look like or our health and so on, and that it's not just reliant on the genetic code, it's the interaction between the two. But what is the genetic code? You know, I showed a picture of a DNA structure there, but what actually is it? What is it that we can analyze? And I loved this installation at the Wellcome Collection Museum. It's no longer there, unfortunately, but fortunately I took some pictures of it. The Wellcome Collection's an amazing free museum you can go to on the Euston Road, and the exhibits are all kind of medically themed. And in one of the really big exhibit rooms, which had double height ceilings, was this huge bookcase spanning from the floor, you know, to almost 2 floors in length. And they had these giant books on them, lots of volumes, labeled, as you can see here, from 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 22. Now, what's in these books? Well, there's a couple of books that were open here, so we can take a look. And what you can see is there's really, really tiny print. And if you zoom in, all of these books are made up just of the characters A, C, G, or T. Now, if we zoom out again, this bookcase is one human's genetic code. So it's all of their DNA printed out and put onto a bookcase. How many letters are there? There's 3 billion letters. They're all A, C, G, or T, and that is the genetic code. Within those 3 billion letters determines what you look like, how you behave, even things like how empathetic you are, how much sleep you need, and your risk for diseases, including glaucoma. So luckily for me as a researcher, I don't have to look at all of those 3 billion letters because that would be very challenging. We don't actually change, we don't vary between humans at many points in the genetic code, but there will just be certain points, like for example, in this patch of one of the books, it might be only at 1 letter that we change, where say most of the population have a letter C at that point in the genetic code, but some people have a different letter, they just have the letter A there. And that change at that point in the genetic code might change how well a gene works. It might increase how it works. It might decrease how it works, which can then influence something like eye color or risk of glaucoma or so on. Now, if it's just one change at one point in the genetic code, that is enough to cause a disease on its own. There are some good examples of that. So that's how cystic fibrosis is caused, by one change in the genetic code passed down through generations. Sickle cell anemia is another disease that's caused that way. And some breast cancer, not all breast cancer. Now, some of you might have heard of the BRCA, the BRCA gene. And people that have certain mutations in that gene are at a much, much higher risk of developing breast cancer. And you may know this from stories about Angelina Jolie. So that, like this New York Times article that she wrote about her medical choice. Her mum had a terrible time with breast cancer, and Angelina Jolie was interested to know whether her mum might have had a BRCA mutation that was passed on to her. And it turned out she did. Angelina Jolie did have one of these mutations. And that was her medical choice. She decided at that point to surgically have her breasts removed, mastectomy, and that to prevent herself, really lower her risk of developing breast cancer in the future. So some of glaucoma is inherited in this way, but it's less than 5%. So less than 5% of glaucoma is there one mutation in one gene that causes the disease. The vast majority of glaucoma, the majority of glaucoma patients don't have one change that in itself causes disease. They've got lots of changes, which are all quite common. Many of us might have each of these individual little changes at different points in the genetic code. But it's when you have lots of them working together cumulatively that you reach a threshold of risk, which then means you get the disease. And that's called a complex disease. So just going through that again, each individual factor on its own doesn't cause disease. It's when you've got enough of them in combination. And because there'll be lots of people who will have some of these genetic variants and never get disease, and others that get disease without every single one, it's complex. It's quite difficult to find each of these needles in the haystack to be able to understand it. And for years, it was too complex for us to understand. But there's been some exciting changes recently. One of the changes has been the cost of measuring genetic code in people. I mean, it must be costly, right, to read 3 billion letters per patient. And certainly back in 2001, it cost $100 million to do that. And in recent years, it's been plummeting. And you don't even have to measure all of the genetic code. We've now worked out specific parts of the genetic code, maybe around 1 million parts that we need to measure, that we can then work out a lot of the other parts. And that's enough to be able to predict risk for diseases like glaucoma and many other things. In fact, it's become so cheap, you can now go to your local pharmacy and do it yourself. So I don't have any financial interest in any of these products, but I think 23andMe is a fun thing to do. It's a company where you can have your own DNA measured. You go buy this at Superdrug, you put your saliva in a tube, you send it off, and then you can look at your own genetic results, and they present it to you in a very easy to understand way. And it can tell you things about fun things like what your sleep patterns might be, how sticky your earwax is, and silly things like that, to also your risk of certain diseases, your risk of having side effects from drugs. Ancestry is an important thing. So while I feel very British because I was born here and I went to a British school, both my parents are Lebanese, and certainly the ancestry confirms that, and can even pinpoint where my mother and father came from geographically, which is quite interesting. But if you are thinking about doing this for yourself, it is a lot of fun. One advice is if you wait till nearer Christmas, they always make it cheaper. So a little bit of advice. Here's my ancestry report. Confirming that actually, I'm not British, genetically speaking. I'm very much Middle Eastern. And this is my report for my risk of some diseases here. And you can see actually I don't seem to be at an increased risk of any of these diseases. And what I think we need to be working towards, or actually I think we're there already. We've done the research to base this. I think we can start to predict people's risk of glaucoma just on the basis of their genetic testing. Now, I don't know, how many of you have glaucoma yourselves or your carers of people with glaucoma. So I hope you don't mind me talking more generally about glaucoma now. Just to remind you all that glaucoma is a really important cause of vision loss and blindness in the world. It's the #1 cause of irreparable, incurable blindness in the world. Cataracts is #1, but you can treat cataracts, you can cure blindness from cataracts. When people have become blind from glaucoma, you can't cure that. In the UK, it's the 2nd commonest cause of blindness following macular degeneration. What is glaucoma? Well, it's a disease of the nerve that communicates what the eye sees to the brain, the optic nerve. And it's actually a disease at a point in the nerve right where it meets the eye. And luckily for us, the eye is transparent, so you can look through the eye at this nerve directly. And this is a view looking into an eye, and this is the overall retina. but it's this part here. This is the nerve, and it's that part that gets affected in the glaucoma. So this is a normal nerve, and all of this sort of pinkish orangey bit you can see here are normal nerve fibers. But as you lose the nerve fibers, you end up with this hole in the middle, a bit like a donut. And so this person's got, sort of moderate glaucoma. And then here you can see there's almost no rim left at all. And it's just this hole. And this person has advanced glaucoma. Why does the nerve get damaged? Well, it's largely due to pressure inside the eye. Now, some people get glaucoma even when the pressure isn't high compared to other people, but that pressure is high for them, and all our eyes are built differently, and some people get damage to the optic nerve even at lower pressures. But even for those people, if we lower the pressure further, we can help to reduce the risk of glaucoma worsening. As many of you will know, the beginning stages of glaucoma are sometimes hard to pick up. These blurry patches often go unnoticed by patients. And that means, if you wait till people are getting symptoms from glaucoma, as sort of depicted in this picture here, it can be too late because we can't go backwards. We can't cure this blindness. And so we need to pick up the glaucoma early. So why don't we, say, like breast cancer, where there's breast cancer screening, don't we do screening for glaucoma? Well, unfortunately, our tests aren't quite good enough. And when, this was last looked at in the UK, and it was decided actually general population screening is not recommended. If we did do that, there'd be too many people we're picking up with potential glaucoma who don't have it, which means it's not effective to screen for that. There are other challenges with glaucoma. Once you have been diagnosed with glaucoma, we find it currently, especially when we first meet patients with glaucoma, to decide what their risk of blindness is, because it differs for everyone. So this funny moving diagram here, each little dot is one patient in an NHS glaucoma clinic. And how the patient's moving is how their vision's changing over time. If they're moving to the right, their vision's getting worse in their left eye. If they're moving down, their vision's getting worse in their right eye. So you can imagine the place you don't want to end up if you're a patient is this bottom right-hand corner, because then despite the best care in your glaucoma clinic, you've ended up blind down here. But you can see there's lots of patients that really don't get very much worse at all. And so if we could work out who's going to end up down here, we could focus our treatments and resources on those patients and maybe spare the side effects and worry from these patients if they're at low risk. Another, I would call this a nice challenge. We're lucky in glaucoma now. There's so many different treatments. There are lots of different types of drops. There are lasers. There are the traditional bigger surgeries from the past, and now there are smaller surgeries, so-called minimally invasive surgeries. We've got so many options, which is great. But one thing we perhaps aren't so certain of is which treatment's going to work best for each individual patient. So I might, see a patient and start them on this drop and say, oh, that didn't work, and move over to this drop and say, oh, I'm sorry, you got side effects from this drop. Well, let's move on to something else. Whereas really, can we actually do better than that? Can we predict, using genetics, of course, which of these treatments will work best for each individual patient right from the outset? Now, there's been a big study recently called the LIGHT study, the LIGHT trial, which showed that a good initial treatment for glaucoma was laser, depicted by this picture here, something called selective laser trabeculoplasty, and showing that really that should be offered as a first-line treatment, as an alternative to drops. So when people first get diagnosed with open-angle glaucoma, they can be offered drops or laser. And laser can do amazingly well. It doesn't work in everybody. Around a quarter to a third, it won't work at all. But what we've done here is that we can start to look at how individuals respond. So if we were all the same, based on this study, this is how we would respond to laser. The pressure in our eye would initially go down really well, and over time, the effect would wane off. but we're not all the same. We're all different. And so here are all the individual pressure responses to laser within this study that made up that average response. And you can see some people do remarkably well. Others do okay, not so bad. Some people get worse. And so really the future of glaucoma care is, before you do the laser, being able to predict who's going to do really well and you do the laser in them, and who's going to do maybe less well, so you do something else instead, like maybe eye drops. So in my research and my collaborators in my group, we believe that the answer to a lot of these challenges in glaucoma care lies in the genetic code, those 3 billion letters I talked about. In fact, when you plot out how genetic human diseases are, glaucoma is one of the most genetic common diseases. So when I say common, I mean not like really rare genetic conditions, which, you know, around 1 in 1,000, less than 1 in 1,000 people have. It's one of the most genetic ones. And previously, we really didn't understand much of the genetics, so it was hard for us to make any predictions. But in recent years, we've made some big advances, and I'd like to try and share those with you. Now, when we do a genetic study, we like to summarize the very complicated results into one graph. And this is the type of graph that summarizes the results. Now, going along horizontally here, starting from here, going all the way along there, is the genetic code. So remember that bookcase, starting off with the book volumes labeled 1, all the way labeled up to 22, going along here, along ACGT, and so on, is the genetic code. Each dot on this graph is one letter in the genetic code where there's a difference, where it might be 70% of the population have an A, 30% have a C. And then how high up the dot is plotted is how relevant that change in the genetic code, that variation in the genetic code, is for glaucoma. If it turns out that loads more people, a higher proportion of people with the letter C have glaucoma than the letter A, then the higher up this dot would be. Now, because we're doing so many tests, statistical tests along the genetic code, we need to be very, very certain that there's a difference in the proportion between, say, C or A at that point in the genetic code. So the dot has to be above this red line for it to be significantly associated with glaucoma. Now, 5 years ago, this was the state of the art. This was putting together all of the studies around the world, and this is where we were at. And there were 9 points in the genetic code. And these were the genes they were at. They have these names that might not make any sense to you. You don't need to worry about that. But this is where we were at. At this point, this knowledge was not enough to help us predict who's going to get glaucoma and who wasn't. Now, you may not be surprised to know that this plot is often called a Manhattan plot, because it looks a bit like a Manhattan skyline. And what you're looking for in the results are some of the really tall towers, like the Freedom Tower here. And the more of these you have means the more significant results you have, which is exciting because it teaches us about what causes the disease. It can lead to new treatments, and it can also lead to ways that we can predict risk, like in our 23andMe reports. So then a big game changer was this UK Biobank study, which is a huge study of 500,000 people from all around the UK. And we're really lucky. Eye measurements were done towards the end of the study in over 100,000 people. And we're lucky because eyes sometimes get forgotten in big studies like this. And it was really the lobbying efforts of Professor Sepeng Kaur, Professor Paul Foster from Moorfields and UCL that persuaded UK Biobank, eyes are important, you should do the measurements. This is a sped up version of a video we used to show we can do 6 tests in 10 minutes because it's so expensive to measure so many people. And that included this test, which is a measuring intraocular pressure, the pressure inside the eye. It does it with a puff of air, but it's a bit more of a clever puff of air one than you get in the local optician. It measures two pressures and it tries to get to the true pressure in the eye without being so influenced by how stiff the coating of the eye is. So we did a genetic study. We said, can we work out why people vary in pressure in the eye? And now I'm going to show you the Manhattan plot that we got. And this was really exciting to us because that line you have to be above to be significant. So all the way down here, because we had such significant result. This looks much more like the Manhattan skyline now, loads more skyscrapers. In fact, there are 133 skyscrapers. Now, when you start to understand so much of the complex puzzle of glaucoma, it starts to make sense. You can start to now pick out biological pathways that are important. You can see, well, this gene, this gene, this gene, this gene all work together in this way. Now, one key pathway was for anatomy and development. And this was really interesting because it was basically saying, even though glaucoma is a disease that comes on as an adult, actually, it was how you were developed anatomically, in the womb or at a very young age, that gave you the plumbing that was either going to last you 100 years or only last you 60 years before it gets clogged up and the pressure goes up in the eye. So this idea that you're genetically predetermined to potentially get high pressure later on in life. The other thing is that there's different parts of the eye which fluid leaves from, different parts of the plumbing. And it was pointing to a new part that we hadn't really thought was important in glaucoma before, called Schlemm's Canal. And if I show you here, here's a schematic of the eye. If we really zoom into the part of the eye which fluid flows through, there's this meshwork sieve, and then like a canal with channels coming off the canal, which fluid flows through. This meshwork part was where everybody thought glaucoma affected. But actually our results show that this may be just as important, if not as important. And that is opening the door for new ideas. For example, the laser treatment I talked about targets this part of the eye. But if somebody has the type of glaucoma, genetically speaking, which affects this part, there may be no point in lasering here. And maybe the people that don't do so well with the laser are people that have a problem here, and we should be targeting our treatment here or doing different types of treatment. Now, can we start to predict then, on the basis of just the genetic code, who's going to get glaucoma and who isn't? So what we've done here is we take people's genetic codes. We know all of those genetic variants which increase the risk of glaucoma. And based on that and a formula, we give each person one number. That one number, it's called a polygenic risk score if you're interested. That one number is your genetic risk for glaucoma. Now, if you divide here, this is an Australian population, into 10 equal groups, and you order them in terms of increasing genetic risk. So this number 10 here have the highest number for genetic risk, the highest polygenic risk score. They're at 15 times the chance of having glaucoma than people at the bottom genetic risk. There's 15 times more people in this 10% than there are in this 10% with glaucoma. Now, what's exciting about this is you can maybe target screening at these people. So while doing population screening on everybody doesn't work, if you just screen people with 15 times the amount of glaucoma in them, we think that this is going to make screening effective. And we're already in the process getting ready to test this moving forwards in a huge study in the UK. In the meantime, what do we do to detect glaucoma? Well, in England, you can have a free eye test at your local optometrist, courtesy of the NHS, if you're over 60 years old, or if you're over 40 and you have a first-degree family relative, that's a mother, father, brother, sister, child with glaucoma. And also, if you've been previously diagnosed with glaucoma or you've been advised by an eye doctor you're at risk of glaucoma. What I'd like to see in the future, if our study proves that it's worth it, that in the future, maybe if you're 40 years old, 40 or older, plus you've been shown to have a high genetic risk of glaucoma, then I think that should entitle you to a free NHS eye test, so you can get your glaucoma diagnosed early on, so you can prevent that irreversible vision loss. Now, moving on to what about this problem about glaucoma in the clinic? Which patients are low risk? Which ones are high risk and going to end up here with blindness? How can we identify these people better so we can tailor our treatments better? And then also this issue that we can't predict before we do a treatment who's going to do really well, who's not going to do so well. How can we personalize those treatments? And so I'm excited to say at Moorfields Eye Hospital, and soon to be rolled out across the country actually, with making a Glaucoma Bio Resource. We're inviting glaucoma patients, like patients in these plots that I've shown you, to have their genetics measured so that we can look back and say, well, this was, compare red people to green people and see how do their genetics vary. Compare people who get a really good pressure lowering response to those who don't. How do their genetics vary? So that in the future, when we have genetic data available for everyone, we can then, at the point when somebody comes to see us, interrogate that data and say, oh, look, listen, we think you're at quite a high risk. So we're going to start not only this treatment, we're going to do this treatment as well. And we're going to see you more often to make sure that you don't fall in this trajectory. Or you might say, well, look, I'm not sure whether you have glaucoma or not. And on the basis of your genetics, you're at really low risk. So rather than bringing you to the hospital every 6 months, I'm just going to suggest you see your local optometrist once a year. And I think that you'll be fine. Or it might be, well, I'm considering starting a drop. I'm not really sure. Oh, you're green. Actually, rather than maybe giving you a lifetime of irritation in your eyes and side effects from the drops, we're going to hold off and just observe you for now. So being able to predict risk and response to individual treatments, I think can revolutionize glaucoma care, prevent blindness, prevent side effects, and I think make glaucoma care a much more satisfying, a much more acceptable experience for patients. So patients will overall be more satisfied with their care. Now, another aspect of research, if we're going to be telling people, healthy people in the population, you're at increased risk of glaucoma, then surely we need to be able to provide them with the lifestyle choices that might reduce their risk of glaucoma. Now, this has been an understudied area for quite some time. So I was really keen to research this, and we were making really good progress. The first thing we looked at actually was something that was dear to our hearts across all of the researchers on the project, and that's caffeine. You know, largely coffee and tea here, but actually we get caffeine from a lot of other sources. And in the UK Biobank study, which we've talked about, they asked about all kinds of foods and drinks which can contain caffeine. And we calculated on average how much caffeine each individual participant consumes. If you're interested in the UK Biobank, what the coffee and tea drinking behavior is in UK Biobank, maybe most of you won't find this surprising. Coffee is in blue, and you can see most people don't drink that much coffee, and you know, it's a small amount that drink, you know, 5 or 6 cups a day. It's the other way around for tea. And I thought this was quite staggering. Nearly 20%, nearly 1 in 5 people in UK Biobank drink 6 or more cups of tea a day. Maybe not surprising for many of us, we are a tea drinking nation. This surprised some of my American collaborators. We've brought together some of the best people in nutrition and epidemiology to look at these modifiable risk factors. And so some of them are from the States, because when we asked if the coffee drinkers, which type of coffee do you mostly drink? Is it ground, instant, or decaf? by far, UK Biobank participants drink instant coffee, which our American colleagues thought was, well, quite frankly, they thought it was disgusting. I didn't tell them that I think American coffee is disgusting, but anyway, some interesting facts about caffeine consumption in the UK. But what about the results? Well, this was really, really interesting. So let me explain this graph. Going across from left to right here was higher caffeine intake. So in the left here, you consume no caffeine. At the right here, you were some of the highest consumers of caffeine in UK Biobank. And up and down here is the pressure in the eye. Now, why are there 4 lines? Well, we've divided up the participants by their genetic risk. And this top line here is the people at the highest genetic risk, the top quarter of genetic risk in UK Biobank. Here's the bottom quarter of genetic risk, and here's in between. And what you can see is if you're at high genetic risk of glaucoma, the more caffeine that's you intake, the higher your eye pressure. A bit less so for those at just genetic, and if you're not at high genetic risk, there isn't higher eye pressure with greater caffeine intake. So this was a really striking finding, suggesting caffeine intake might increase pressure in people's eyes, but only if you're genetically predisposed. Now, this funny number here, the reason I kept it in, even though I don't really expect non-scientists to understand what it means, this is called a gene-environment interaction. And if the number is less than 0.05, it means it's significant. And most studies don't find significant gene-environment interactions. They're quite hard to come across. And so this was really significant. How caffeine affects the pressure in people's eyes very much depends on genetics. But that's eye pressure. What about chance of glaucoma? Well, actually, the results were similar and really very significant gene-environment interaction. So here, again, higher caffeine intake as we move to the right, and going higher up here is a higher chance of glaucoma. Below this red line is a lower chance of glaucoma. And what you can see here is the people at highest genetic risk are in purple. They're these lines here. As people drink more caffeine, it's only those at the highest genetic risk and actually at the highest caffeine intake where the chances of having glaucoma jump up. So putting this all together, it seems that caffeine may well influence the chances of developing glaucoma. To really prove that, you need to do a study moving forwards where you get a group of people and you randomly stop some of them having caffeine and randomly make some other people have caffeine and see if they get different rates of glaucoma in the future. And I think you'll know that's not ethical. Certainly, I wouldn't want to be part of a study where at random I'd be told to either definitely have caffeine or not have it. So we'll probably never get that level of proof. So this might be the best level of evidence we have. And it might be that caffeine does increase pressure and glaucoma risk, but only if you're genetically predisposed. So in the future, we're going to need to know people's genetic code to give them the best lifestyle advice. So hopefully, I've persuaded you that in the future, we're going to be able to look after glaucoma better, because we're going to be able to better pick up who in the general population has glaucoma by enabling targeted population screening. On the basis of genetics, we're going to be able to know from the outset who's at high risk of losing vision, so we can treat them more intensively and spare costs and side effects for people who don't need such intensive treatment. From our brilliant toolkit of lots of different treatments for glaucoma, we're going to be able to pick the best treatment for each individual patient first off. And also in the future, we're going to be able to give lifestyle advice that works for each individual, because we're all different and lifestyle changes don't have the same effect for all of us. It's different for each individual. So thank you for your attention, and I really look forward to answering some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Anthony. That was absolutely fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. I always learn so much when I hear you talk. So thank you so much for doing that for us today. We've had a few questions come in. As I say, I'm going to try to focus on the ones that are most relevant to what we're talking about today. And then if we have any time at the end, I'll try to cover the others. But as I said, I want to stay focused today. So one of the things that have initially come up for me is about the targeted screening according to polygenic risk. This could create some quite sophisticated pathways for the health service to be able to deal with people. Now, in the long run, I'm sure this will save the health service money if you can identify people and they don't have to go down that long route of things. But in the short term, is it a realistic kind of economic scenario for the NHS to be at that position where we have everybody's genetic information?
So it is happening in terms of genetic information. The future isn't that, you know, someone will come into my clinic and then I'll say, we're not going to, hold on, we're not going to do any treatment here. I'm just going to do some genetic testing, and then we wait a month and we get that. That's not how it's going to work. In the future, everyone who receives a healthcare service is going to get this genetic code measured. So the exciting prelude to this is a study that's just starting now called Our Future Health. And that's going to be on 5 million adults in the UK. Now that's a big chunk of all UK adults already. And they're all going to have this genetic code measured. The interesting thing is when you're doing it on that scale, it's going to cost £20 to do that genetic test. And remember that one test, it's not just going to tell you about who to screen for glaucoma. It's going to talk about breast cancer, who, you know, at what age should you start breast cancer screening? How frequently should you do it? Prostate cancer. It's going to tell you about cardiovascular risk. At what stage should you start taking a cholesterol lowering medication? And which one should you take? It can predict who's going to get side effects from statins, so you use something else. So that one £20 test. So the future is that everyone will have this genetic code done. It will probably be held centrally by the NHS. And then if someone comes to see me in my eye clinic, then my electronic medical record will interface with that genetic code. It won't send me all 3 billion letters. It will send me just maybe the 200 letters I need. And in a formula, it will then give me the risk. So right there, at the moment I'm seeing a patient, it will give me the risk of vision worsening, the chances of each different treatment working. So we can, right from the outset, pick the best treatment strategy.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. We've got lots of interest about your caffeine charts as well. Lots of interest on there. In fact, somebody has asked me, I had a question about it. Someone's asked to hear, the findings about caffeine and genetics is very interesting. Does that mean if I already have glaucoma, should I cut down on caffeine? And that was the kind of thing, if you already have it, does it make your glaucoma worse? I mean, could it be that, or do we not know that?
So, I mean, like I said, we still don't even know for sure that caffeine increases the chance of glaucoma, because to prove something, you need to do what's called a randomized trial. And as I've said, it's just not going to be possible. It's not going to be ethical to force people to not have caffeine and force people to have it. The things we've done haven't looked at severity of glaucoma. It wasn't a population of glaucoma patients and seeing, well, the ones who got worse drank more coffee. That is something we might do in the future. But in the meantime, I think this knowledge is interesting. The way we think that caffeine might increase the pressure in the eye is that when you consume caffeine, it increases how much fluid your eye is making. Now, if you've got a healthy eye, even if you make more fluid, the plumbing, the drainage is good enough to drain it, to drain that away. Now, probably if you're already a glaucoma patient, it might suggest your plumbing isn't quite so good. And so it might be that actually, if you drink a lot of caffeine, it might be putting the pressure up. Now, if you're a glaucoma patient, you've got mild glaucoma, your pressure's being controlled by your eye drops, you're at low risk, you know, I would say, you know, don't alter your caffeine habit. If you're one of you know, I have a few patients where despite our best efforts, the vision's still continuing to get worse. You know, we just can't have that control. And, you know, this information is important. And it might be that if you're somebody that is in that situation and you consume a lot of caffeine, I would definitely consider trying, maybe not stopping it, but reducing that consumption. While there isn't proof, you know, it might be something to try.
Excellent. Okay, so moderation is the key, perhaps, in all of these things, isn't it? We've had a few questions about congenital glaucoma and the genetic risks in terms of congenital glaucoma. So I've got someone who said, is congenital glaucoma caused by just one change in the genetic code? Is it in the less than 5% glaucoma, which is inherited in this way? So yeah, people interested in how congenital glaucoma and genetics.
Spot on, yes. It is, you know, so certainly for the ones where we've worked it out, it is a change in one point in the genetic code. Most frequently, if it's something called primary congenital glaucoma, the mother and father both have that change, because you actually get one copy at each point in the genetic code. You get two letters, actually. I kind of oversimplified it. You get one from your mum, one from your dad, and for a lot of primary congenital glaucoma, you get the incorrect letter from both mum and dad. And it's crazy, isn't it? Just 1 point change in the genetic code can affect that gene so much that it doesn't work, that even at birth, there's something that's not quite right, and the pressure goes up. So that's, you know, it's actually quite rare, primary congenital glaucoma. The less than 5%, actually up to maybe 4% of glaucoma that comes on even as an adult follows that pattern. There's a gene called myocilin, if you're interested, and that's the common one. And it can be just one letter change in the myocilin thing that causes a high pressure glaucoma. For one reason or another, it's not bad enough that it comes on at birth. It's something where there's an abnormal process where this abnormal protein gradually builds up in that meshwork that I showed you, that by the time you're in early to mid-adult life, that's when the pressure starts to go up. The exciting thing about that actually is if we knew which 4% of our glaucoma in our adult glaucoma clinics were this myocilin problem, that points towards the disease being definitely at the trabecular meshwork. And so that might prompt us to say, well, let's bias towards doing a treatment that focuses on the trabecular meshwork, like the laser trabeculoplasty, like some of these newer surgical techniques where we can put a stent in the trabecular meshwork to open it up, rather than if you were somebody who genetically had a Schlemm's canal or collector channel problem, you wouldn't bother doing those treatments. So lots of exciting potential in the future.
That's wonderful, thank you. And somebody on the congenital things, has there been any research on the hereditary risk of congenital glaucoma based on genetics? There has. I mean, you're talking about some of the stuff that's kind of come from it. Yeah, I mean, if there's any links or anything to particularly good studies, Anthony, if you can send me anything, and I'm happy to put them up on websites for people to see or to get back to people on those.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it often comes up out of the blue because you know, it's the coming together of the mother and father. It might be in the future, if we're all not just genotype with the markers, the £20 test, if in the future it becomes cheap to measure the whole DNA code, so we can pick up these really rare mutations as well. It might be that people, before that they decide to have a family, you might even be able to pick up on the chance that, oh, well, you've both got this thing. If they come, you know, if they come together, which there's a 1 in 4 chance of, then you know, there's that risk. But I think that's quite a long way away.
I've got a question here about, well, which is, I think a lot of people feel sometimes that zoosis is fascinating and amazing for the future. It's also quite scary. And a lot of people kind of feel maybe some hesitance in wanting to know what the genetic risk is to certain conditions and to diseases. And then how this may affect things like insurance, you know, going forward. And there's, I suppose, lots of ethical questions that need to be looked at.
There are. And so, you know, that on a national global level, there's been a lot of public consultation, stakeholder consultation, patient consultation. You know, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what are the issues, what are you worried about, what are you excited about? In general, most people are really excited and really positive about the good that can come from this. The main concerns, you raise some of them, are, you know, maybe I don't want to know my risk of disease, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Another one is this, you know, yes, if I'm genetically vulnerable, if I'm genetically weaker than other people, more likely to get disease, am I going to be treated differently, including by insurance companies? And really, you know, I think that's a valid concern. And I think in the same way that we have the National Health Service here, that treats all people, regardless of your wealth, regardless of pre-existing conditions, you know, it has to be that ethos that protects everybody and makes sure everybody's treated equitably within a healthcare system. Otherwise, there is a risk, as you say, about treating people differently. Other things people are concerned about, we can learn so much from these genetic studies, and drug companies often use the data from these studies to learn about new drugs, or learn to say, well, out of our 100 drugs here, based on these genetic findings, which are most likely to work, so we can take them. And so it's great for developing new treatments and drugs, but the public are concerned that maybe pharmaceutical companies will then charge the public a huge amount of money for these drugs that they developed, even though it was from the goodwill of them sharing their genetic code and their data to help develop those drugs. So that's another concern. Another concern is just safety. You know, if you're going to hold my genetic data, which is a very personal thing, are you going to look after it properly? Are you only going to allow access that's very anonymized and safe and only to people who you know really should have that access? So those are a lot of the concerns. I think, you know, given this is being rolled out on 5 million adults now, you know, there's a lot of involvement and engagement with public and the patients, and I think we're going to learn a lot as we go forward. And you know, we're helping advise that, but something that we're leading specifically for glaucoma is you know, what about all of these issues specific to glaucoma? How acceptable is it to tell a healthy person they're at high risk of glaucoma? Is that just going to mean that they're going to be worried about blindness all their life, and you've actually, you know, made them worse off than before? And actually, when we've asked people, it's a resounding actually no. For glaucoma, it's acceptable, because actually the only thing you need to do is just make sure you go get your eye test every year, and then you'll probably be okay. And that actually, you don't want to be one of those people that gets it really late and then it starts, oh damn, if only I went to the optician 5 years ago, 3 years ago, I'd be in a much better position. And so I think, and given that we've got such effective treatments, if they're given early enough, you know, there's actually overwhelming support. And that, if for some reason you strongly feel against that, please do get in touch with me through Glaucoma UK, because I'd love to hear more about your views. But in general, it's been almost 100% consensus. This is important. This is what we should do. And it's different for other diseases. Dementia is the classic one. Do you want to be told you're at high risk of dementia before you've got it, even though there might not be a good treatment or a good way of stopping you getting it in the future? That could make you worried, and there isn't maybe much you can do about it. Whereas with glaucoma, there is something you can do about it.
I think that's fascinating. I think you're absolutely right. You know, it kind of depends on the disease or the condition. It depends what's available in terms of treatment. But the concept itself of using more genetics information to be able to make these kind of predictions for the future. So it's the kind of concept of it, and actually the real life use of it. And you're right, people may vary depending on it. So yeah, that's very interesting. One of the things have come through, I've got a couple of people who want to know this. Where do normal tension glaucoma patients come in all these studies? Are their normal pressures still relevant to the results?
Well, 100%. And you know, the glaucoma results I showed you included people with normal tension glaucoma. And actually, the genetic factors which contribute to people having higher or lower pressure, not only do they contribute to high pressure primary open angle glaucoma, they also contribute really strongly to normal tension glaucoma. So the key here is really that even with normal tension glaucoma, the pressure in the eye is important. You've got to remember the normal range is huge, it goes from 10 to 21. So even within the normal range, there are people who've got twice the pressure of other people in that normal range. Now, if your pressure was always 19, 19, 19, you'd probably need your pressure to go up to at least 25, 28 to get glaucoma. If your pressure used to always be 10, 10, 10, 10, and it went up to 18, that's nearly a doubling of your pressure. That's enough to cause glaucoma, yet you're called normal tension glaucoma because the pressure is still in the normal range. So our genetic results actually support that theory, that even normal tension glaucoma is a disease of the pressure in the eye. It's just that your eye is susceptible at a different range of pressure to other people.
One of the questions, thank you. Sorry, I'm reading and listening at the same time. One of the questions we've got is come through about things like eye shape, genetic eye shape. As we know, certain glaucomas are more prevalent in certain populations, depending on things like potentially about shape of the eye. So it says here we have a multi-generational glaucoma risk in some populations, which obviously comes through the genetics. It's just a point, really, more than a question.
Yeah, no. The shape of the eye, the anatomy, is actually critical, and that was one of the #1 things that came out from all of our studies. So yeah, it's this idea that the eyes, in the same way we all look different in our faces, we've got different anatomy. The anatomy of our eyes is all different, and there are general patterns which vary by race, and so an Asian eye is different to an African eye, is different to a European eye, and those variations have a profound effect on risk in the future. And then there's micro things, Europeans all look slightly different, and Asians all look slightly different, and so it's those subtler changes in anatomy that we can now start to predict genetically that really do influence disease risk.
Absolutely. Kind of in the past, we've had to kind of lump people together in large groups to say there is more higher prevalence in certain groups, but this will enable us to be far more careful about who we're actually testing. And that's why you were saying about targeted screening, being something that really is going to be very useful kind of going forward. I'm going to be finishing up in a minute. I've got a question here just about lots of people really interested in how they can get more involved in research in this area. Someone saying that they're a congenital glaucoma patient at Moorfields, and apart from bio research, are there any other research projects to get involved with in this regard? So
at Moorfields, we do have a web page, part of our website. So if you go to the website, I think it's called ROAM, ROAM, but it's for anyone who's interested in research, and you can just sign up. And even if there isn't a current project that's directly applicable to you, you can sign up, and when something does come up, you'll be contacted. We at the moment, for the Moorfields Glaucoma Bio Resource, if you are a patient at Moorfields and you're not on the Bio Resource, please do contact us through that platform, and we'd be delighted to recruit you. It just means a questionnaire and a blood test, and nothing else from you, actually, because we then just work out your genetic code and we link it to just your test results in clinic that you're normally doing for your routine care, and that's enough for us to do what we need to be doing. And soon, as I said, hopefully within the next couple of years, this same model is going to be rolled out in other parts of the country, so other people can have the opportunity to participate too.
Absolutely. And we've just got here on our Glaucoma UK website as well. If you want to get involved in research, please go to www.glaucoma.uk, go to the research part. And this includes a link that Anthony's just mentioned to the Moorfields research, and also any other research opportunities coming up that we're looking to hopefully get people involved with. So please keep an eye on our website for for research stuff there. Someone just asked, someone had to go earlier, but I just want to say that yes, this talk is obviously live now. It's going to be on our Facebook page, but if it'll also be going up on our YouTube channel in about a week or so. So if anyone has had to leave, or you're obviously not here now, or has missed half of it, or wants to show somebody else, please do catch up with it. We've had so many wonderful questions. I'm sorry if I haven't got around to your questions, guys. As I said, I tried to keep things really specific today. If I haven't answered your question, particularly if you have some concerns about your eye drop medication and side effects, please contact our helpline. I'm going to put those details up in just a second. Anthony, thank you so much for that. That was absolutely fantastic. And as I said, I always learn new things when I'm watching you speak. And as I said, thank you for putting it into such user-friendly language that I can process and understand. So thank you so much. I'm just going to put up my final slides now, just to kind of finish off for today. So bear with me while I just go back up to sharing my screen, guys. Okay. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you found it as useful as us. So please feedback as well as a poll that I'm about to put up now. So please don't leave till you've completed this. Let me just put up question 2. I'm going to launch this poll. Again, the same question as question 1. How much do you feel you know now about glaucoma and genetics? So that's really useful. I can see you all putting your results in there. As I said, the best thing to do if you have questions that are unanswered or general kind of generic glaucoma questions is to give us a ring on our helpline. The telephone number is 01233 648170, or you can email us at our helpline at helpline@glaucoma.uk. The helpline is open from Monday to Friday, 9:30 till 5. So please give us a buzz. Now we're going to be taking a short Easter break from our talks because we're all exhausted following that fantastically successful season we've just done. But we are going to be back with our spring-summer seasons of talks on the 26th of April at 10:30 with a talk called Patient Experience of Surgery. The next talk after that, we're going to be welcoming consultant ophthalmologist Leon O, who will be talking to us all about MIGS, or minimally invasive glaucoma surgery. Now we have all of the talks booked and confirmed all the way through to the summer on subjects including visual fields, glaucoma care pathways, hot glaucoma topics, and congenital early onset glaucoma. If you'd like to join us for any of those talks, please sign up on our website, get registered. If you see anything that takes your fancy there, please sign up. Again, all free and available to watch. A last thing for me to say really is we're going to send you a survey to anyone on Zoom today. If you could fill that in for us, that's fantastic feedback, which we use to then move forward with our talks onto the following seasons. The more feedback that we receive, the better we can make these talks. Okay, I think that's our hour up. Anthony, thank you so much again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Look forward to hearing from you soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you now. Bye-bye.